Are you listening? Damn.
On this episode of the Endurance Hour Podcast, episode 337, post-Ironman recovery, special needs, pros and cons, Ironman fueling lessons learned, to kick or not to kick when swimming, and first-time Ironman triathlon racing tips. The Endurance Hour Podcast starts right now. We begin with Alan, who sent Wendy an email at wendy@t2coaching.com. He says, listen to the podcast, not on social media, so I won't be able to join your Facebook group called T2 Endurance Group. He's 55. He swims a 100 yards swim in 2 minutes, same speed for a full mile. So he's able to maintain that speed, Wendy. Only proficient at freestyle. He has a question here about using a kickboard and going backwards, but I want to mention that since he was talking about social media, we have the T2 Endurance Club. It's a private group on Facebook. You have to request to join, so we keep it confined to people who are very serious about multi-sports. And in that request, we have 3 questions for you, and they are: how'd you hear about us? What kind of events are you training for or interested in? And do you have a Training Peaks account? And we have a new request today, and this is from Kirsten Smalls, and she says, my friend Lisa invited me to this group, and she's interested in Ironmans and triathlons, but she doesn't have a Training Peaks account. Why is that important? Why do we ask that question, Wendy?
Well, we do sell, I think, over 20, maybe up to 24 training plans on Training Peaks, ranging from single sport swim, single sport bike, single sport run, multi-sport, half marathon, marathon training plans. And so we just want to see who's active on Training Peaks and who isn't, so they understand when we're talking about our training plans, that's what we mean. They're training plans on Training Peaks that we created. And most multi-sport athletes are connected to Training Peaks. You can get an account for free. And it's just a great place to download programs, keep training logs. I think is really the biggest benefit of having the Training Peaks account, and just kind of staying a little bit more connected to the multi-sport community.
And if you go to endurancehour.com/33%, we give you a code that you can apply to any one of those programs on Training Peaks for a 33% off discount code off that amount. So that is for anybody. Just go to the website to get that code, and you'll be good to go.
And also, if you send me a swim or run video for analysis, I will send you a 50% off discount code to any of our swim and run programs on Training Peaks.
And you can see that swim form analysis link to learn about directions on what to do on endurancehour.com. So Kirsten wanted to be involved in the T2 Endurance Club on Facebook. And we're going to give her an approval because I checked out her page and she is definitely into fitness. Sometimes we get these spam or these people who are not even related to fitness or have no interest but somehow want to join a group. So we can approve her, not approve. She has been approved. All right, back to the initial question from Alan. So he says here, when I use a kickboard, I go backwards. So my swim is almost 100% arm driven. What recommendations, Wendy, do you have to improve my speed? And I still have not cracked the 130 for 100 yards. Issue is speed, not stamina.
So I'm smiling because if you're a 2 minute per 100 swimmer for 100 or a mile or a 2.4 mile swim, to get down to 130, because you mentioned 130, is probably a little bit unrealistic unless you focus 100% of your time and effort for many months, possibly many years. It takes a lot to drop 30 seconds per 100. So having said that, I think it's a great goal. Also, I don't want to discourage anyone from trying to improve and improve that much in their swim. I think it's great. So when you kick on a kickboard and you go backwards, it's because you're not using your quads and hip flexors and or have very inflexible ankles. And you're generally kicking from the knee down with flexed feet. I shared with Alan multiple videos that I have on the Endurance Hour YouTube channel of me demonstrating the kick, as well as talking about the exact issues he's having. I'm actually in the water talking about, if you're kicking like this, and I demonstrate, this is what you need to do. So I think hopefully that has helped him out just by me sharing those videos. And second, I encouraged him to send me a swim video for analysis because there's multiple reasons, or there's multiple ways to get faster. It does start with breathing, body balance, kick, and rotation. And then you look at the three main phases of the stroke: recovery, hand entry, because that will impact how you have your underwater catch and pull, which ultimately provides forward propulsion. So I didn't elaborate much on his technique because I don't know what it looks like. I just know if you're a 2 minute plus per 100, you probably need to work on those basics of breathing, body balance, rotation, and kick. And then we want to move forward with the recovery, hand entry, and underwater catch and pull.
What are your thoughts or advice on someone who doesn't kick or doesn't practice kicking? How can that impact or not impact or have an impact on your swim in general? Because you're talking about body balance, hand entry and stuff, but I've seen your swimming and you swim super fast without kicking. Sometimes it's just a matter of a light flutter.
Right. So that's a great question. I wanted to actually mention that I'm definitely an arm-driven, upper body-driven swimmer. I wasn't like that when I was a youth competing, but I definitely changed my style of stroking for the freestyle when I became a triathlete. And so the kick, yes, the kick is important for balance. The way I teach swim technique and a lot of other coaches out there is kick enough so your legs don't sink, which means you kick enough from the quad and hip flexor, as well as the flexible ankles come into play so your legs stay on top of the water. When you swim, you want the top of your head, your hips, and your heels on top of the water. That's the body balance part of it. And so if you kick too much, especially if you're kind of the beginner intermediate that learned to swim as an adult and you have a powerful kick, well, maybe it's not even powerful. You just use a lot of energy from your kick. Depending on that ankle flexibility, you might not be making any forward propulsion with your kick. It's like someone like an elite swimmer or an Olympic swimmer. They have a powerful kick that they're moving forward with their kick. A lot of adult triathletes specifically who learn to swim as an adult don't have that strength and power and technique yet. So I usually try to minimize someone's kick. If you're wearing a wetsuit, which most triathletes do, then you don't kick at all. So there's really no point in my mind to necessarily do kick sets unless you're someone like me who likes to put fins on and do some various kicking to stretch out my legs to loosen them up from tightness that I get from from biking and running.
I mean, you can also work on your overall endurance and strength with fins or by kicking just to get the cardio system fired up.
Yes. So the con of kicking too much and not really making any progress is it's a lot of wasted energy, and it'll increase your heart rate and breathing rate, which again, if you're a beginner swimmer and you're not very comfortable with a higher heart rate or breathing rate, it's exhausting and frustrating.
What would you say to a swimmer who says, I'm so nervous about the kick, my legs I always feel heavy in the water, I'm going to exclusively use a pull buoy, or they're going to use some sort of core shorts, just the neoprene shorts?
I think they're both great tools. If this particular athlete is going to be swimming in an event where they're not going to be wearing a wetsuit, then they should spend some time without using the tools like a pull buoy or a wetsuit or a core short. Really, when they get down to that race preparation part of their season, 8 to 12 weeks out, they should get comfortable just swimming, because if you're in non-salt water, your legs are not going to be as buoyant. If you're going to be if you know you're not wearing a wetsuit because it's too warm, you should really take the time and learn the proper mechanics like balance and alignment. And that's just going to help you get more comfortable and gain more confidence to tackle any type of turbulence and, swimming near other people. And I think there's a lot of resources out there in, 2022, 2021 that every triathlete has access to get comfortable in the water and build some confidence.
I admit, since I know all my events are going to be wetsuit related, I strictly use either a pull buoy or core shorts. because I know it doesn't matter when it comes to the race day that I'll be not kicking. I might have a little bit of a flutter, but I'm a heavier athlete. My legs are quite muscular, so I'm always nervous about my legs dropping and having to kick so hard, and I'll lose that energy. So I just go for me, and that's just my goals. These are my objectives, and I know my plan is that I'm just going to be in a wetsuit always when I race. And for my training, I'm going to just work on my upper body and work on my form. That way I have a stronger upper body and pull and that kind of stuff. So that question is kind of from me and a mission that if you ever see me swimming, I'm always going to be wearing core shorts or a pull buoy because I know what my objective is, and that's only racing in a wetsuit.
Right. And I think that's very appropriate. You're doing race specific training. That's how you're going to be racing. So why don't you race in why don't you train in what you're going to race in? I'd also say is, to develop a little bit more sport specific strength is wearing hand paddles. Again, if your technique is good and you're not going to damage your shoulders from wearing hand paddles, because that'll help improve your strength, especially that catch and that pull. So even though you're going to be wearing a wetsuit, what if for some reason there's a little bit of wave or some turbulence? That upper body strength is going to help get you through it, just like it helped me get through Ironman Florida. I think part of the reason I didn't get any jellyfish stings or anything like that, and I was able to strengthen my way through that riptide that I didn't even know was a riptide, was because I'm an upper body swimmer and I do a lot of strength training in the gym, and I have a high turnover. So I think I was able to push those jellyfish away because of my higher turnover when I swim. And so, I think you're going to be fine just using the buoy and the core short.
And I think when you talked about people who are going to be using paddles, I think paddles also reveal maybe your weaknesses so you can work on them. So with the paddles, you have to swim correctly for them to be used correctly. Otherwise, you will have shoulder issues, or you're not going to be able to pull correctly. Just like putting your hand in the wind outside of a car. If you move it around, you'll catch the biggest wind. If you move it to the side, obviously it's going to slide through. So the pull buoys reveal where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about core shorts, I do want to mention I have a new Blue 70 discount code for athletes. I have a 30% discount, as well as if you're new to Blue 70, I have a 40% discount. So people can check out those core shorts on the Blue 70 website, and to get that discount, they can join our newsletter.
And you can get that newsletter link on endurancehour.com. I love my core shorts because I wear them all the time. I rinse them out afterwards for the chlorine issue, but I think this is my second pair. And it's just I would wear any kind of jammer shorts, core shorts, regardless of brand, just because I want that buoyancy. So, but that's a great deal. I'd take advantage of that by going to the newsletter on endurancehour.com.
Yep.
So that was from Alan. Thank you, Alan, for your question. Another question, and this was below a post I made on Endurance Hour's Instagram account yesterday about we're doing the podcast. You have any questions or comments? This is from the Hangry Triathlete, and she writes, need some golden nuggets of advice from your wealth of experience that you would give someone, who's training for their first full distance race. And I did a follow-up asking them, to be more specific, but Wendy does have some nuggets of advice for your first full and long distance triathlon / Ironman. Yeah,
I have a few. The first one is don't set a time goal. Just set a finish goal. It's important that, we all do create these internal time-driven goals, even if it's our first one and we have no idea how we're going to experience the process and what's going to happen race day. But I think it's really important to have no expectations and no time goals for your first one. You still want to get from start to finish as fast as you can. But just if you get rid of that expectation of a time goal, I think that's only going to help you as an athlete enjoy the process more. And the process meaning all the training, fueling, mental preparation that you're going to experience on your journey to complete the iron distance race. Number two is if you're going to follow a training plan, or if you have a coach, trust the plan, trust the coach, and try to get rid of all the distractions that you're going to see on social media or that you're going to read, because there's so many athletes out there that want to share their advice. And sometimes the advice is pretty good, but you want to make sure if you're getting advice from anyone that you trust the source and that you're You're going to do your own research. And if you don't trust the source, ask someone that you do trust. When I started triathlon in 1992 and I did my first Ironman in 1997, there was none of this social media stuff. There was really not a lot of information out there. So I had to learn by doing. I had to learn by trial and error. And there's something to be said by learning as you go and making mistakes and adjusting and trying to figure it out on your own instead of having all this overwhelming information out there. So I think that's really important. And, really just allowing yourself to enjoy the process, be flexible with the plan, make sure the plan fits around your life instead of trying to fit your life around the plan is really important as well.
This is so appropriate. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. And when it comes to actual race day, it's all about fueling and pacing. So that's really something you have to pay attention to while you're preparing physically and mentally for the race day.
So Jackie Herring, professional triathlete, former teammate of both of ours in the past with Timex, had this post, I think it was just yesterday or this morning. She, this is perfect. She did a half marathon race. She types here, show up, do your best. Results don't matter. Believe it or not, this is the recipe that opens me up and allows me to have some of my best performances in races. It removes any expectations, pressures, or blockages that could hold me back. I'm not shackled by specific paces, although I'm aware of generally paces I can handle. I'm not invested in with a finishing time, although I usually have a sense of where I may end up. And I thought it was brilliant because she just, as a triathlete, she's doing a half marathon race just to do it. But she's not thinking about, I've got to be at a certain place. I'm just going to go and race. And I think maybe that's what, on the heels of what you said, don't have expectations for a time on your first Ironman. Get out there, experience it, and absorb it. And then you have a time to reflect on how it went and then where you can start making tweaks.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you, Jackie, for being part of our show without even knowing it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And she's been on our show in the past anyway. All right, moving on. This is two other questions. This one's from Julie. We'll do Julie first here. No, let's do Karen. Karen says, I just listened to your race report on episode 336 of the podcast, and you mentioned, Wendy, changing your fueling plan. Please elaborate on that. What did you change and why in reference to your Ironman Florida race a week and a half ago, in which you qualified for Kona once again?
So thank you for asking, because that was a big part of my preparation was my fueling. I've never really had much GI distress, except one race in 2009. Usually my fueling has been pretty good, but it does stem back to everything I've learned from my first 20 Ironmans. So this whole year I reflected back on the first 20 Ironmans I've done, and I took a little nugget of information that I learned from myself in each race, and mostly it had to do with nutrition and pacing. And so like when I did my first Ironman in 1997, I just showed up to Kona. I ran into my girlfriend Laura and I said, what is this special needs bag all about? Like, what do you do? What do I eat and drink? I have no idea because I really didn't practice it, And so she told me what she did. She puts Fig Newtons in her special needs bag and she gets that on the bike. And then she takes a gel every 2 miles. So what do? I went to the store, bought some Fig Newtons, put them in my special needs bag, got them at about mile 60, ate them. Oh my God, they were delicious. They were so good. And I had not had a Fig Newton the whole training session, but they worked for me. And then what happens on the run at mile 2, I grabbed a gel because I believe those were the actual sponsored product. And I had a vanilla bean goo. It was actually goo. Vanilla bean goo, my first one and my first marathon and my first Ironman. And it worked. So for years, I did that same thing. I put Fig Newtons in a special needs bag and I ate vanilla bean goo because it worked. And then it didn't. I think it didn't because I just kind of got sick of that product. And I eventually over the years stopped using special needs bags. But I in the past, I'd put like bagels and peanut butter and get that. When you get that on the bike, real food, so to speak, it's so good. And I went to the Gatorade Sports Science Institute in 2007. I got my sweat rate tested. They dialed me in with calories and hydration, and I used that in 2008. And that's when I won the overall world championship for amateurs. So that worked. So I did that plan until it didn't work. And then I hit 40 and things just changed. I felt like I needed more calories. I felt I started cramping for the first time. And so I had to like really kind of change my nutrition, but it was really confusing because I was dialed in but then I wasn't. And so I decided this year I wanted to go back to more like real food. And I ate a Larry's and Lenny cookie, which is 400 calories. I had my bagel and peanut butter again in my special needs bag, which was about 400 calories. I started the ride with about 400 calories of Fig Newtons. And then I only had one bottle of Gatorade and one gel. The rest was water. And again, this was very new for me because I used to not drink much water because it makes me have to urinate a lot. So I usually stuck primarily with Gatorade. But I've done this for so long, the thought of drinking that much Gatorade just didn't appeal to me. Mm-hmm. So I trained with this product. In my training rides, I rode a lot on this 5-mile loop called Collins Drive. If you're in the Atlanta area, you know what I mean. And I would stop at mile 40, have my bagel and peanut butter, and that would make me want to keep riding. Okay, I can do another 20 to 40 miles. Or if my goal was 100 miles, I'd stop at my car at mile 60, grab my bagel and peanut butter, and that would kind of motivate me and say, okay, I'm ready to go again. And so it was a mental thing too. And I actually used Noon. I haven't used Noon tablets in like 10 years because when I used them in Ironman Boulder 2014, that actually race, so it's been 8 years or 6 years. When I did use Noon in Ironman, I was dehydrated at that race and I had to go to the emergency room when I finished because I was so dehydrated and they gave me 2 IVs in the medical tent and it wasn't enough. So I'm like, oh, Noon doesn't work for me, but I tried it again and it worked for me. So those are the reasons why I did what I did. So it's just really important to find something that works for you as an athlete. I coach so many athletes that still do gels and bars and energy drinks, and that's great. But for me, the thought of too many gels and energy drink does not motivate me to want to eat or drink while I'm training or racing. So it's hard to eat bagels. Like when I got my bagel at mile 58 in Ironman, Florida, I had it already broken up into little pieces in a baggie. So for the next 20 miles, I was eating a bite every, 10 or 15 minutes. And so it took me an hour-ish to eat that 400 calorie bagel and peanut butter, but it was so good. And it just mentally gave me the boost I needed to keep going.
Can you talk more about the dehydration you had in Boulder? What were your symptoms? And how were you able to continue on racing if 2 bags of IVs didn't work?
Well, okay, so that's an interesting thing. So this was in 2014 2014 because I had won my age group that year. I qualified for Kona that year. I think I was the 2nd overall amateur female in Ironman Boulder. I believe that was the inaugural year. And I was from Fort Collins. I trained at altitude. I'm an experienced triathlete, but the dehydration that happened to me was like I came from flat land to altitude and I didn't know what I was doing. So I had a successful race. I didn't feel nauseated. I didn't feel any symptoms while I was racing. I think I started to cramp at like mile 18, but I took some Gatorade and it went away. And I was waiting for my husband because he was a volunteer at the medical tent. And about a half hour after my race, I just started feeling really nauseous. And I'm just like, I need to go to the bathroom, but yet I couldn't vomit, but I felt really weak, really fatigued, really nauseous to the point where I just had to sit down and I knew something wasn't right. And so my husband, thankfully he was with me. He took me to medical. They took my blood pressure. It was like 60/40.
Whoa.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I let this happen to me because I thought I was drinking. I mean, I drank, I don't know, like 5-6 bottles of water and Noon on the bike. So I had the electrolytes. I had the hydration. I probably drank more, but that's what I remember. And I just couldn't believe that was happening to me. So I was so excited to stay for the midnight finishers too. So because those 2 bags of fluid didn't get my blood pressure up, they sent me to the ER in a EMS van. And I was so disappointed because when I got to the ER, there were actually 3 huge emergencies.
Yeah.
So I had to lay there for like 4 hours. I got 2 more bags of IV, but because there were these 3 major emergencies when I got there, I was put in the back because I was not really an emergency. And so I'm lying there and I'm like, oh my gosh, all my friends are finishing and I'm missing them. And I was just really disappointed. But the two extra bags, so 4 liters total, helped me get my blood pressure maybe up to like 100 over 70 maybe. So it definitely helped me. But I look back on that race and I'm like, I just couldn't figure out how I allowed myself to get that dehydrated.
I had a question for you as an athlete, and I'm thinking about this when you were talking about special needs bags and picking those up and whatever. I don't do that anymore. I did it maybe the first time because I thought it was cool, or that's what people did. Cool isn't the right word, but I thought, oh, that's what first-time Ironman athletes do. They have a special needs bag. You put in your cool stuff in there, you know, peanut butter and jelly, whatever, a cookie, a hamburger that's from the night before, whatever it may be. I don't do that now because I'm concerned about time. I know I don't want to slow down. I think about the next guy because I'm a competitive age group. Not that I'm going to do anything. I'm usually top half or top third, but I don't want to slow down and lose those valuable times, especially on the bike when I can make up some time from someone stopping. And then I'm very liquid based on my nutrition. So I really fill up my bottles, and I have a bottle that's strictly nutrition and then one that's hydration. And then I go back and forth. And then I also pick up some things at the aid station, whether a banana or whatever, to complement or supplement whatever I'm feeling like I need. And I think you said something about Florida where you took a little extra time in transition, or there was a race in transition that you like, I'm going to put on extra clothes. And that seems like a valuable time, not wasted, but valuable time not spent moving. So your thoughts on, even now as a competitive age grouper in your age group, do you still stop for special needs, and do you find it's worth stopping to get that?
So in previous years, early on, this is like late 90s, early 2000s, I used to do a bagel and peanut butter or some sort of sandwich. And I wouldn't necessarily stop. I would be handed the bag by a volunteer, and I would sometimes be able to continue riding, grab my sandwich and throw my bag, or I would just have to slow down and stop for, a couple seconds, One time in Arizona, I think this was the last time I did it, was Arizona 2007. It was so windy when I got my special needs bag. When I grabbed it, I almost blew off my bike. And so I'm like, oh, this, or got twisted the bag got twisted in my bars or something. Anyways, and then you if you're eating something solid like that, you got to slow down so you can chew it and, finish it off. I don't think it's a time waster. I think if it's something like I knew mentally and physically it was going to help me, it was my nutrition. Like that was what I needed. I needed my own nutrition. So I needed my special needs bag. A lot of people who use special needs, it's because they need that nutrition because they can't rely on nutrition on the course. So it's not wasted time at all. It's funny that you asked this question because in Florida, there were no volunteers giving you bags. So all the bags were kind of lined up by your bib number, and there were signs with your, 0 to 100, 100 to 200.
Wow.
So I had to stop, set my bike down on its side, go search for my bag. So I did probably lose a couple minutes doing that. And then while I was stopped, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take my gloves off now and, throw my gloves in my special needs bag because I don't need them anymore. And I'm just going to take my time and take a couple bites before I start riding again. Because at that point, again, it was part of my plan. It was part of my execution. Okay. I wasn't worried about time. In Florida, when I chose to change and take all my wet stuff off after the swim and put on dry clothes, to me, that was 2 or 3 minutes extra was so worth it to stay a little bit warmer and comfortable. And I think ultimately in that type of race, if I had not qualified for Kona because I lost 2 or 3 minutes because of the time I took at special needs and the time I took in transition, I would have been okay with it because it was so worth it for me to do that.
I understand that because you could probably just go you could continue going, and maybe you needed that extra top off in order to go a little harder, a little longer. And I've taken time, especially in T2, to put on dry socks. I mean, it's a no-brainer for me. I got to put on some socks because I'm going to be out there for the next 4 hours. I want to be as comfortable as possible. I'm going to shake the legs out. I'm going to stretch because it's a long day. I'm not going to be qualifying anytime soon. So that's the time that I'm going to relax a little bit. And I don't feel it in the back of my head I can hear the clock ticking. Oh, you're losing time. You're losing time. Although in an Olympic or a sprint, I'm absolutely going, how efficient. I'm going to carry something between the bike to run, whether it's a hat, well, not my bib number because I have a technique for that. But you see people sometimes, they'll carry their bib number on their race belt, or they'll carry their glasses or their hat with them as they run out and put them on, because you're moving, you're advancing in the race. Whereas if you stopped, someone else could be just a light jog past you while they're carrying their stuff.
Right.
Interesting. We've got time for one more question. This is from Julie, and she's talking about, says she asked this question the day after finishing Ironman Florida. Quote, "The way I feel right now, I think I could go back to working out quickly, but I'm under the impression that's not a good idea. Should that active recovery mentality be in place for a week, a month? What do you think?"
I think it's a great question. So Julie completed her first Ironman, and she was supposed to do Ironman California, and she deferred to Ironman Florida, and I was her coach. And recovery, how long do you need to recover after an Ironman is dependent on two things. Number one, how hard you run the marathon. And number two, how fit you were going into the race. The more fit you are, the faster you're going to recover. The less impact you do in the marathon, let's say you walk a lot in the marathon, the faster you're going to recover. So in my case, I ran a really good marathon and I pounded the pavement, but I did recover quite quickly. And I blame that as I went into the race really fit. So that's just another indicator that I did the proper training, I did the proper taper, everything worked out, and it all came down to where I was at race day. Now, for a first timer, I'd say err on the side of allowing your body more rest. And it doesn't mean time off. It just means don't try to go hard. Don't try to push any intensity, and just don't force it. Now, after my first Ironman in 1997, I forced training too much too soon. And about 6 weeks later, I got really sick, and I was sick with like some sort of chronic fatigue for like 6 months, maybe even longer, where I couldn't work out until like a year later. I was that sick. I had a lot of issues, and I just didn't recover. And so I know how important it is to recover, and it's mostly a mental thing. You need to go for walks, go for easy swims, go for some swims, keep them easy and keep them short, and just assess your body and mind every day. And you kind of know when you're ready to kind of get into a routine. And being this time of year, it's out of season for most athletes at least in North America, where there's no rush. It's allow yourself, the best time to take time off is after your A race. It's just the best time to at least take time completely off, and don't get back to the training plan you were on before your race. Just ease into it very lightly, because there's no rush. Recovery is part of the training process. And I think one mistake athletes make, due to my experience that I've done, and then just as a coach, is athletes don't know how to recover.
Type A personalities. That's why we do this frickin' race in the first place.
Right.
Because we want this huge challenge, adventure, and then after we've built this up and we've done the event, there's a huge cliff. There's a huge letdown of now what? Plus, after you've had that race, you know what it takes to get there. So taking time off, whether it be a month, you're going, wow, and the self-pressure of like, I'm losing all this fitness. In a way, you've lost the fitness, but you've already gained this experience and this base. It's so hard to be patient as a long-distance triathlete, because you know the road it took to get there, and then oh my gosh, it's a long road to get back to where I was if I don't continue training. But you need that recovery.
Right. And that was my mentality in 1997. I was 24 years old. I didn't have a coach. There was nothing to tell me how to recover. I was the fittest I've ever been in my life. I didn't want to lose it.
Yeah.
But look at me now. I'm still the fittest I've ever been in my life 30 years later, at least 30 years later since I started, 25 years later since my first Ironman. So, just listen to my advice and just have fun and go be active, a couple, at least 2 weeks, at least take 2 weeks to just not even think about starting back up again. And then after 2 weeks, kind of assess where you are, because it's really important to know immediately after an Ironman, you're on an emotional high, whether you did well or not. And those feelings will change. You're going to be on an emotional roller coaster mentally and physically. You're going to have some residual fatigue. You may hit you 3 or 4 days later how exhausted you are from your race. And then emotionally, I want to do another one. I don't want to do one. I want to do one. I don't want to do one. And so just be very clear on your why and give yourself time, because it is a lifestyle. You don't need to, it's not one and done. You don't need to decide right away if you want to do another one or not. Just let your body and mind, give yourself time and let it dictate when you want to do another one.
This sounds going to be funny, but a triathlete's lifestyle is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I like that.
I'm going to ask you, I thought about doing it off air, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What's the deal with you doing a 5K or a 10K less than a week after your Ironman, when you said you were going to recover and take it easy?
I did take it easy. So Don signed us up for a trail race. It was a 5K at Rote Mill Park, which is a park we were at when we first moved here. It's always a trail. And he goes, "Hey, do you want me to sign you up for a 5K as part of your recovery?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And it was beautiful. It was a nice day. I did it. There wasn't a lot of competition, so I just kind of did what I needed to do to still win it. But it was a very small race. And I felt actually really good. So it was another test of I'm recovering really well, and I really do miss the trails, and I'm excited to start trail running again and enjoying the fall hiking weather and terrain and trees and colors.
You're not the average triathlete, so I understand that you can do that kind of thing. Not everyone can.
No, not at
it's
all.
all circumstances. But either way, congratulations. And I saw that going, that little devil. She went out there and won a 5K. Like less than a week after doing a full distance. She is the Kona coach.
And you know what? And you're right. I'm going on 30 years experience. I'm not going on 1 year experience.
Yeah.
I didn't just finish my first Ironman. I finished my 21st one.
Yeah.
And like I said, I learned from 1997. I learned from every Ironman what my recovery is like and what I want to be doing and what I don't want to be doing. And so it's definitely a very case by case basis. Some people, like me, I was excited. Someone asked a question in one of our recent podcasts about how do I stay motivated in the fall training? I knew after Florida, I was excited to recover, and I'm excited to get back on the trails. And so I'm excited for lower volume training, because I know I'm not going to lose anything. I know I'm going to be where I'm going to be next year. And so it's just totally a case by case basis.
Yeah, and I think that's for people who do their first Ironman, whether it was the gal who wrote in earlier, you need to have something to replace that next goal. If you have nothing to look forward to, you're going to be depressed. You're going to go, going to just wandering aimlessly. What do I do now? Think about having trail runs, or think about, let me take up, some sort of other activity, mountain biking, something to fill that void of all that training that you put into. Otherwise, you'll be sitting at home going, "Oh, I feel depressed. I got nothing. I'm a loser. I got nothing to do." Think about having a plan after your big event, so you have something to look forward to.
Yeah, post Ironman depression syndrome, it's a real thing. That's what happened to me for probably my first 3 Ironmans is, because I didn't have a goal. And your goal could be, I'm going to take 2 months off. That's a plan. It's important to have a plan. And as I coach athletes, I make sure we discuss their post Ironman plan, and it could be time off. It could be a couple weeks off, and then they're going to do this. Maybe they're going to do a single sport. Maybe they're going to focus on their swimming or running, which is definitely 2 things that I like athletes to focus on in their, once they've had time off, to get back in the pool if they need to work on swimming, or get back on the running circuit to work on their running. But they don't have to do a marathon. They don't have to do an ultra. Just do some local holiday 5Ks. There's so many things to do 12 months out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to educate yourself and have a plan.
Well, with that, we'll wrap up this episode 337 of the podcast. Thank you to everyone who's sent in questions. You can leave us a question by email, wendy@t2coaching.com. You can go to our T2 Endurance Club group on Facebook, below on social media, on our YouTube channel, Instagram. We're everywhere. Just look in Endurance Hour and you'll find us. With that, thank you again for another podcast, Wendy, and for listening, everybody. Have a great week of training, racing, or recovery. We'll see you next week. Adios.
Adios.